guys, welcome back to Jaws Aviation, and number 2 in a series what might now end up being 7 in Florida flying. Given the amount of information I want to share in this video, that I might actually split this up into 2, so I'm going to deal with some of the differences in the rules of the air and the expectations and flying in the US, in particular around Florida, which is where I flew. And then in the next video, video number 3, I'll actually deal with some of the tools I used and websites, etc., to actually prepare before I went across. So great to have you back again. First of all, many of you will recognize this. It's for testing the fuel. One thing that took me by surprise, I didn't get caught out, I was warned about it, is that it is illegal. Particularly in Florida. I'm not sure if it's around the rest of the USA. If it is, maybe you can pop a comment below and let us know. But illegal to actually put sump fuel onto the ground. So it's important you don't do that. You dispose of it appropriately, or if you've got one that filters the sump fuel, what's common, I noticed in Florida, is putting it back into the tank again. A lot of the airspace categories and rules in the States very similar to what we have here in Australia. I will run through them very quickly. They do have Class Alpha, Class Bravo, Class Charlie, Class Delta, Class Echo, and Class Golf airspace. Now, all of these are controlled airspace except Class Golf, which is uncontrolled below 1200 feet, sometimes 700 feet, depends on how it's marked on the charts. Class Alpha airspace, as a VFR pilot, you almost certainly will never be in it. It starts at 18,000 feet MSL and goes up from there. Class Bravo, if you're going to fly around Florida or most major cities in the US, you're going to come across Class Bravo airspace. In particular, we came across it around Orlando. It is marked in blue, as you'll see on the chart here. The key thing to note about Class Bravo airspace is that you cannot enter it unless you receive a specific clearance to do so. So you actually want to hear the magic words that you are cleared to enter Class Bravo airspace, and then you can enter and follow the instructions given to you. Class Charlie, a bit less restrictive than Class Bravo. Class Charlie is marked with the magenta, usually two layers to it, as marked on the chart here. Class Charlie, all you need to do is to actually make two-way contact with the controller there, and then you can actually enter Class Charlie airspace. Class Delta is very similar. The Class Delta is marked with the blue dotted line, but likewise you don't enter until you've actually established two-way communication with the tower, and then you can enter Class Delta airspace. Now, the tricky one, I guess one unusual for us here going across from Australia, is Class Echo. And the Class Echo airspace is pretty much everywhere above 1200 feet, although it can be from 700 feet. Now, Class Echo is controlled airspace, but for a VFR pilot, you do not need to be talking to anyone. The key thing to note here that potentially you might see some IFR traffic flying around, but always good practice to be talking to somebody, particularly centre, maybe if you've got flight following in place in Class Echo. So before you go flying in the States, you really do want to brush up on the rules around Class Echo airspace. So flight following is something you definitely want to use in the States. It's a fantastic service and they really do look after you. They'll follow you from point A to point B. They'll hand you over to other centres en route if you're going on a long distance. The controller will give you a squawk code and you'll enter that in, very similar to what you get here if you're flying through controlled airspace. They'll then want to know your aircraft type and your destination, so basically where you're flying to. Good thing to bear in mind is that you're still responsible for your own navigation and keeping a good lookout, but there will be an extra pair of eyes just watching over you if you use flight following. And when they do hand you over and you're to another centre, you just check in with that centre, just give them your aircraft type, registration, and your altitude. There's actually some special use airspace. There's a thing called the Military Operations Area, or MOA, clearly marked on the charts again. You are allowed to fly through a military operations area, but you do need to know if it's active or not, or if it's hot or cold. And if it is hot, you do want to keep a good lookout for any military aircraft. I had a great story when I was across there of a training flight going through an MOA, and the controller called up this particular training flight saying, look, we've got an F-16 also doing some training and would like to come alongside you as part of the training. And so this particular, I think it was a Cessna, if I remember right, this F-16 drew alongside them for a short space of time. That would have been really cool. Didn't happen to me, but would love to have seen that if it did. Now, for restricted areas, you can enter them with the code, often used by military helicopters in that airspace. Flight following will confirm with you if the airspace is hot or cold. The recommendation I received is do not plan to go through a restricted area, or if you do, make sure you've got an alternative ready, because these things can turn hot fairly quickly and at very short notice. So the recommendation I received, and which I'll pass on to you, is plan to go around restricted areas rather than through restricted areas. Now, joining the circuit in the States, the preferred method is the 45-degree entry to midfield downwind, and that's the encouraged entry for most airfields. Obviously, it's not the only way you can enter, but it's certainly the one that's encouraged by most. And certainly, as I was flying around, it's the entry to the pattern I heard used more often than any other. If you are joining from the opposite side, they do recommend that you overfly the airfield at 1,500 feet. Make sure you stay clear of traffic, and then actually descend on the lie side, believe it or not, down to pattern altitude, and then come back in and join at 45 degrees to the downwind. Now, that covers most of the differences, or even highlighting some of the similarities between flying in Australia and flying in the US. As I said, I was going to take a bit of time just to go through this, so I thought I would divide the videos up. So in the next video, I'm going to spend a bit of time on just talking through how I prepared to go. Again, not claiming to be an expert. I'm not an instructor, only just done I guess a relatively small amount of flying in Florida, but loved it. But just want to share some of my experiences with you to help you along the way if you want to consider doing something the same or something very similar. After I've done this next video and sharing how I prepared, I will then move on to the flying, I promise, and we'll be focusing on that, possibly 4 flying videos coming up. I haven't finally decided, but some really interesting experiences there, which I'm really looking forward to sharing with you. So to make sure you don't miss out, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and you'll get notified of when the next video is uploaded and ready. Look, thanks for joining us. So looking forward to having you join me next time. Take care and safe flying.